Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very special guest here for the show today, a very, very special guest. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Paul Vecchiet. I'm a science fiction author, and I'm calling from my home in West Virginia, Bridge, West Virginia.
Okay, Paul, can you go ahead and talk about, can we dive into a little extensive history about your past leading up into what you do in your present?
Sure. Um, the the book is could be an autobiography. So um, the the key parts of my life that impacted the path that I'm on uh, started out at a very young age when I was in Catholic school, and at that very young age, I had critical thinking, and I was skeptical about what they were teaching us, even at a young age, and uh, I even uh, had a lot of we would say PTSD from all of the descriptions of the graphic descriptions that the nuns would tell us about the suffering of Jesus and the crucifixion and the nails going through the hands and all of that. I think I was the only kid that probably was shuddering every time I heard those words and descriptions. But I still felt that something wasn't right about what they were teaching us.
Yes.
Um, so, uh, in response to that, I sought something else to I guess engage with, and that was science fiction and the science, which was at that time manifested in the space programs, Mercury, the Gemini program, the Apollo program. Those were all broadcast into our living rooms, and the science editors on the news gave us great detail about it, and I was very enthralled by the whole thing. And you combine that with my interest in science fiction, classic science fiction, like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, and later on uh, the shows, Star Trek and things like that. Um, that pointed me in a direction where it was I was focused on space travel. I was focused on a alternate uh, universe, a utopia, for example. Um, I was it when I was younger, in high school. I was just mystified by the broadcast of the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast by um, Orson Welles, and I would go into um, the school library and pick up the album and listen to it. Um, I was fascinated by the fact that people actually thought that that was real and that it caused a hysteria throughout the country. So, um, but the one thing that I always thought um, at the back of my mind was that there was something more that was beyond Catholicism. Yeah, there probably was a God, but it wasn't the way that they were telling us. And
I
that
agree.
that kind of uh, was validated when I was in high school. I accidentally fell asleep listening to a rock music station, and it later changed into a talk radio show. And I woke up in the middle of the talk radio show, and it was Eric von Daniken talking about Chariots of the Gods, and he was explaining um, word for word in a book of the Bible called Ezekiel, where Ezekiel describes, in his words, seeing God, seeing angels, and things like that. And Von Daniken explaining that it was a misinterpretation of high technology. And when you read the words, again, based on what Von Daniken was saying, it made a lot of sense. For example, when Ezekiel was saying that the hand of God was on his chest, that could be interpreted as the G-forces when he was in the craft, pressing on his chest, an invisible hand of God. So things like that. There are descriptions of flames without heat, and so that would be like lights, for example. So all of that kind of validated the fact that there was something more about the Bible, about religion, that I needed to know more about.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I called myself agnostic, not Christian, not Catholic, believing that there's a greater force out there, but not the way that they were telling us. Okay, so fast forward to when I was an officer in the Air Force. I was a construction manager on a project in a very sensitive facility called Foreign Technology Division. And that was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And Foreign Technology Division is the organization that takes the information that they get from spies about weapon systems of other governments, and they look at the threats, the weaknesses, the strengths, all to assemble a mission based on that weapon system and relay it to our research and development people across the base, where they would take that information and develop weapon systems that would take advantage of the opponent's weaknesses or improve our weapon systems based on their strengths. Okay, so that was Foreign Technology Division. It's surrounded by, at that time, motion detectors. If you had a top secret clearance, even if you had top secret clearance, you had to be escorted. Once you got through the double doors going into the facility, everything was white. There were no numbers on the doors, no names on the doors. There was no directory. Everything was secret. Whoever was in one part of the building didn't know what was going on in the other part of the building. So it was compartmented, and that's the way they kept things secret. My project was on the second floor, and it was for a computer system. And at that time in the 80s, computers were really big, so they needed a lot of space for these massive computers. And when my job was to evaluate the space and make sure that it was ready for construction, and that the drawings that the contractor had, which are called as-built drawings, which are drawings that indicate the condition of the facility prior to construction, that they were accurate. So I went up to look at the as-built drawings, and I noticed that there's a sheet in there that said basement. Now, the facility that we're in is a 2-story renovated warehouse, no windows. Usually warehouses don't have basements. You don't design a warehouse with a basement. It's not economical. So they